When you hear the name Machiavelli, what comes to mind? For many, it's an image of a cold, calculating political mastermind, someone who would stop at nothing to achieve power, and who believed that morality was a luxury leaders could rarely afford. Over the centuries, his name has become almost synonymous with cunning manipulation and ruthless ambition. To call someone Machiavellian is not usually a compliment, it's a warning. But what if I told you we've been reading him all wrong? What if the man who has been painted for centuries as a schemer without a heart was, in fact, giving us one of the most brutally honest and strangely practical roadmaps to leadership ever written? And what if his idea of the perfect leader isn't the tyrant you might expect, but someone far more nuanced, adaptable, and human? In a world where leadership is romanticized in movies and oversimplified in self-help books, Machiavelli stands apart. He doesn't tell us what should work in an ideal society. He tells us what does work in the messy, unpredictable, and often ruthless arena of real human affairs. He strips away the polite illusions and faces a truth many are too uncomfortable to say aloud. People are not always loyal. Promises are not always kept. And morality often bends under the weight of survival. And here's where things get fascinating. Machiavelli didn't just write about how to take power, he wrote about how to keep it. And that required a special kind of leader. Someone who could read the mood of the people, manage appearances, and make hard choices without hesitating. Someone who could be both the lion and the fox, strong enough to command respect, but clever enough to avoid traps. In this video, we'll peel back the centuries of misunderstanding to uncover the truth. Who is the perfect leader according to Machiavelli? By the end, you might be surprised to find that his answer is not the cartoonish villain you've been told to fear, but rather a leader who knows how to balance moral ideals with the unshakable realities of power. Before we begin, remember, this Machiavelli didn't live in a world of political stability, international law, or global diplomacy. He lived in 15th century Italy, a brutal chessboard of constantly shifting alliances, ambitious princes, and treacherous betrayals. His political advice was forged in the fires of chaos, and perhaps, in our own unpredictable times, there's more to learn from him than we think. So, let's step into Machiavelli's mind and discover who he thought the perfect leader truly is. Part 1. The context of Machiavelli's world. To truly understand Machiavelli's vision of the perfect leader, we must first step into the turbulent stage on which he lived. It is not enough to read his words in isolation. They are the product of a time and place where power was not a polite conversation, but a matter of life and death. Machiavelli was born in 1469 in Florence, a jewel of Renaissance Italy, glittering with art, philosophy, and trade, yet shadowed by constant danger. The streets might echo with the music of lutes and the chatter of scholars, but in the halls of power, daggers were being sharpened. This was not a peaceful republic. It was a chessboard where every move could cost you your crown or your head. Picture the map of Italy in his De Florenzi, Venice, Milan, the Papal States, and Naples, each a fiercely independent state, each ruled by ambitious leaders who were often more warlord than gentlemen. And behind them loomed the heavy hand of foreign powers, France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire circling like vultures, ready to strike when weakness showed. Treaties were inked in the morning and betrayed by nightfall. Today's ally could be tomorrow's executioner. Trust was a luxury few could afford. In this volatile atmosphere, survival was not about holding to moral purity. In fact, moral purity could be fatal. Politics was not a sermon. It was a battlefield of cunning and timing. Leaders who tried to govern solely with kindness or unwavering honesty discovered, often too late, that virtue without strategy was an open invitation to betrayal. And in Renaissance Italy, betrayal was not metaphorical. It came with poison in your cup, an assassin in the alley, or a coup at dawn. This was the Italy of the Borgias, the Medici, and the Sforzas, names that still taste of power and scandal. The Borgias were infamous for their calculated marriages, ruthless assassinations, and PayPal manipulations. The Medici built their dominance not only through banking and patronage of the arts, but also through an intricate web of political alliances and backroom deals. The Sforzas commanded armies and ruled with an iron fist, blending military might with calculated diplomacy. These families did not simply survive, they thrived by mastering the brutal language of power. Machiavelli himself was no distant observer. Serving as a diplomat for the Florentine Republic, he found himself in the very eye of this political storm. He was sent on missions to negotiate with monarchs, to gauge the temperament of foreign courts, and to outmaneuver rivals who would gladly see Florence reduced to rubble. He conversed with kings, watched mercenary captains change loyalties for a handful of gold, and saw cities fall not because they were weak, but because they hesitated. Through his diplomatic work, Machiavelli gained an intimate education in human nature, not the idealized human nature of philosophers, but the raw, self-interested, unpredictable reality of men in power. He learned that a promise meant nothing without leverage, that appearances often mattered more than truth, and that fortune favored those who acted decisively rather than those who waited for the right moment. It was in the aftermath of personal and political upheaval that he wrote The Prince in 1530. By then, Florence had been conquered, the Republic had fallen, and Machiavelli himself had been exiled, accused of conspiracy. Stripped of office and influence, he retreated to his estate, spending his days in the countryside. But his nights were different. As he wrote in a famous letter, he would put on his finest robes in the evening and enter the company of the great thinkers of history. There, in the quiet glow of candlelight, he shaped his observations into a small but explosive manuscript that would forever change the vocabulary of politics. The Prince was not a dreamer's vision of leadership. It was a manual forged in the furnace of Renaissance chaos, concise in length, but dense with hard truths. In its pages, Machiavelli pulled away the mask of noble ideals to reveal the real face of power, a face that could smile while plotting, offer friendship while calculating, and promise peace while preparing for war. He did not write to flatter princes. He wrote to arm them, and in doing so, he created a work that, 5 centuries later, still shocks, fascinates, and provokes. Part 2, the qualities of the perfect leader. So, what does The Prince really tell us about the perfect leader? For Machiavelli, greatness in leadership was not a matter of moral purity or noble intentions. It was the art of survival, influence, and mastery in a world where politics was a battlefield without mercy. And at the heart of this philosophy lay 2 core forces, vici and fortuna. Virtue is not virtuous, we use the word today. It was not about kindness, humility, or moral goodness. Instead, it was a fierce blend of skill, decisiveness, boldness, and the ability to adapt faster than anyone else. A leader with vert could bend events to their will, shaping reality instead of allowing reality to shape them. They could see the storm coming and choose whether to ride its winds or redirect its course entirely. Fortuna, on the other hand, was the great wildcard luck, chance, and the unpredictable chaos that no human being could fully control. Machiavelli compared fortune to a flooding river. In its calm state, it can be navigated with ease. Its currents even used to speed your journey, but when it rages, it destroys everything in its path without mercy. And here was Machiavelli's warning. The wise leader never waits for the flood to arrive. They prepare in advance, building dams and channels to guide fortune where they want it to flow, turning chaos into opportunity. But Machiavelli did not stop at verdict in Fortuna. He painted a richer, more dangerous picture of what true leadership demands. The perfect Machiavellian leader is feared, but not hated. Machiavelli understood the fragile balance between respect and resentment. Fear can bind people to obedience. It can make them think twice before challenging authority. But hatred festers. It unites enemies. It inspires plots in the dark. The perfect leader walks this razor's edge, inspiring enough fear to command loyalty, yet avoiding the deep bitterness that breeds rebellion. A master of appearances, people rarely judge reality. They judge the story they are shown, and the wise ruler knows how to write that story with precision. The perfect leader projects strength when they are unsure, decisiveness when they are still weighing options, and morality even when they must act in morally gray territory. Because perception, in the eyes of the masses, is often more powerful than truth itself. Flexible in morals. In the ideal world, promises are sacred. Words are bonds that cannot be broken. But Machiavelli knew the world was far from ideal. There will be moments when keeping a promise leads to ruin, when survival demands the bending or breaking of one's word. The perfect leader does not betray principles recklessly. Instead, they treat morality as a tool, knowing when to stand firm and when to bend like a reed in the wind. Both the lion and the fox, to survive in the ruthless arena of power, one must be more than strong. The lion's raw force can frighten enemies, but without cunning, it can be trapped by those weaker yet cleverer. The fox, on the other hand, can slip out of snares and deceive predators. But without the lion's strength, it risks being devoured. The perfect leader wears both skins, too strong to be intimidated, too clever to be caught. In the end, Machiavelli's perfect leader is not a saint, nor a tyrant, but a strategist, someone who can face the unpredictable storms of life with calculated boldness, who can manipulate appearances without being consumed by them, and who can blend strength with subtlety until they become indistinguishable. This is leadership stripped of illusions, dressed instead in the armor of reality. Part 3. Machiavelli's surprising human side. Here's where things get truly fascinating and perhaps a little unsettling for those who have only heard of Machiavelli through the phrase Machiavellian villain. Popular culture has painted him as the patron saint of ruthless manipulation, the cold architect of cruelty for cruelty's sake. But if you look closely at his writings, the picture is far more complex. Machiavelli was not a sadistic monster rubbing his hands in delight at human suffering. In fact, he disliked unnecessary cruelty. What Hadji believed, and this is the part people often miss, is that cruelty, if it must be used, should be decisive, swift, and purposeful. He argued that drawn-out cruelty is not only immoral, but also dangerous. It breeds resentment, fuels rebellion, and forces a leader to spend their reign putting out fires they themselves started. By contrast, a single, calculated act, however painful, could secure long-term stability and prevent far greater chaos later on. To Machiavelli, the test was never, is this action kind, but rather, will this action secure the state and protect its future? He viewed politics the way a surgeon views medicine. Sometimes you have to cut in order to save the patient. The wound is real, the pain undeniable, but the alternative might be fatal, and this is why he warned against leaders who abused their power without purpose. Such rulers, he believed, were not only morally bankrupt, but strategically foolish. They wasted their political capital on acts of vanity or revenge, eroding trust and inviting their own downfall. Machiavelli's perfect leader was not a predator who attacked for pleasure, but a strategist who understood timing, proportion, and restraint. A ruler who could see beyond the immediate moment and endure the discomfort of hard decisions for the sake of a stable, lasting peace. Contrary to the cartoonish image of him as a master of fear, Machiavelli actually valued the love of the people, though not for sentimental reasons. For him, popular support was a shield stronger than any wall or army. A ruler beloved by the majority was harder to overthrow, less likely to face conspiracies, and better able to rally the nation in times of crisis. An unloved ruler, by contrast, would have to govern through fear alone, and fear, while powerful, was volatile. Fear can be managed only as long as the ruler's power remains unshaken. The moment weakness is revealed, that fear evaporates like mist in the morning sun. This is why Machiavelli's advice often sounds contradictory. At first glance, yes, be feared, but also be loved if you can. Yes, act decisively, but do not act without reason. Yes, use cruelty if you must, but never let it define your rule. Beneath the iron and the shadows, there is a surprising thread of humanity in his thinking. Not a soft humanity, but a pragmatic one, rooted in the belief that stability, order, and the welfare of the state matter more than the ego of the ruler. In short, Machiavelli's human side is not about mercy, for mercy's sake, but about understanding that stability often depends on the goodwill of the governed. He believed that the ruler who keeps the people on their side does not need to live in constant paranoia. And perhaps the most human thing about him was this: he understood that people remember how you make them feel. Rule with cold fear alone, and you will always sleep with one eye open. Rule with a balance of strength and earned respect, and you might sleep peacefully in your own bed. Part 4, Lessons for Modern Leaders. You might be thinking, this is all 500-year-old advice for princes and warlords. What does it have to do with today? The truth is, it has everything to do with today. Strip away the swords, the castles, and the Renaissance politics, and you'll find that Machiavelli's core observations about human nature are still painfully accurate. The world may have traded battlefields for boardrooms and thrones for parliamentary seats, but the underlying game, the struggle for influence, trust, and power hasn't changed. Modern politics, business, and even community leadership are still arenas where perception often outweighs reality. Social media has only magnified this truth. Today, leaders are judged not just by their policies or strategies, but by the image they project in a 15-second video clip or a single viral headline. A modern leader is not just they are a performer, a storyteller, and, whether they like it or not, a brand. People still respond to strength, or at least the appearance of it. They still crave decisiveness in moments of uncertainty, and they still measure leaders by their ability to deliver results, not merely by the nobility of their intentions. A leader who hesitates risks being devoured by faster, bolder competitors. The same survival laws Machiavelli described in the courts of Florence now play out in quarterly earnings reports, televised debates, and even local town hall meetings. In today's world, the perfect Machiavellian leader might be a president guiding a nation through economic turmoil, a CEO steering a company through disruptive technological change, or even a community organizer uniting divided groups under a shared vision. What unites them is not their title, but their mastery of three essential skills: adaptability, the ability to shift strategy when the environment changes without appearing weak or indecisive. A leader must be like water, able to take the shape of any container, yet still retain their essence. Projected stability, not the absence of fear, but the ability to carry fear privately while radiating calm publicly. People follow those who seem certain, especially when the world feels uncertain. Tough decision-making with graceful communication, the courage to make choices that will not please everyone, but the wisdom to present them in a way that preserves trust, dignity, and unity. This is not about cold manipulation. It's about harmonizing idealism with realism. The dreamer sees what the world could be. The realist sees it as it is. The great leader stands in both worlds at once, holding vision in one hand and pragmatism in the other. Conclusion: the perfect leader revealed. So, who is the perfect leader, according to Machiavelli? Not a tyrant, for cruelty alone destroys the loyalty it needs to sustain power. Not a saint, for pure innocence is often unprepared for the cunning and treachery of the world. Instead, the perfect leader is a strategist, a person who sees human behavior as it is, not as they wish it to be, and navigates that reality without losing their moral compass. They understand that leadership is less about personal glory and more about creating stability, order, and direction in chaotic times. This leader inspires loyalty not through fear alone, nor through blind affection, but through a combination of respect, consistency, and a sense of shared destiny. They can make hard decisions without collapsing under the weight of public criticism. They understand that fortune, the unpredictable winds of chance, cannot be controlled, but it can be harnessed if one learns to sail with skill. They are neither purely loved nor purely feared, but they are always respected. They avoid becoming naive, yet never fall into the trap of sin. They can read the hearts of people without being enslaved by their emotions. And when the moment comes to act, they move with precision, striking only where it counts. Perhaps most importantly, they know when to stand firm and when to adapt, when to lead from the front and when to guide quietly from behind. They are the kind of leader who can walk into a storm and make others believe the sun will shine again. And maybe, just maybe, in an age of noise, distraction, and uncertainty, that's still the kind of leader the world is desperately waiting for.